here's what I if we're going to talk about posterity, it doesn't make a difference after the fact. The 14th Amendment, the 11th Amendment, any of that doesn't have any bearing. No other states have any bearing at all, period. Unless someone that is a direct bloodline of these gentlemen can say, have any say about it. Once their bloodline is gone and there's no longer carried on, this whole thing comes to an end. Am I correct?
Yeah, a profound point
That's
about
the
that, Tate,
posterity.
is that the Civil War, World War One, World War Two, who were the mass majority of people who were taken out and killed and destroyed? The
Okay, so
posterity.
therefore, basically, if I own a house, and let's try to put this in a comparison. If I own a house and I don't live in it, but I own it, and just because people come from all over different parts of the city that want to stay in my house, that doesn't give them any right of ownership. Okay, I'm not talking about
Right,
the loyal title thing. I'm just saying basic, like, or borrow my cars, let's say. They can borrow it,
right,
but they do not own it. Nobody
right.
except
And
the
then if
people in my family.
Right. And then if the city manager had it out for you and wanted to change the laws to make it where they could, or say they wanted to kill you, or they wanted to stop you and throw you in jail,
Okay,
if they wanted to get rid of you so that they could make that the new reality, that's a parallel of what they've been doing.
okay.
Um,
So then it
and
has to,
and this
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 all
is
is going to
another
fall on the
reason.
definition of posterity and exactly who this is. This is going to be a specific line of people that can determine by, refutable, unrefutable evidence that they are a direct lineage. And if they were going to go do anything, it would be to a family reunion for these men. Anybody else, I don't give a shit where you are at, what state you're in, what time it is. You don't have any say in it. None. Zero for those 13 colonies. After that fact, it's open game as the states start to enter the union. But they don't
And
have
they
the
haven't stayed.
original. The original. Does that make it sound right? For me, unless you have documentation through the founding fathers that offer posterity to the Indians through a contract at that time. Other than that, I don't understand why people don't understand. It's a family thing. It's not about the states right now. It's about their families they're trying to take care of.
Right.
That's
Go
like a
ahead.
will. So
Let's
somebody
let
can't come in.
Adam, because
Me
we
and
got
Joe can't.
Adam
Hey, me and Joe
has his
can't
hand
come
raised.
in. Hey, me and Joe can't come in and say, "Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
we're good, buddy, and we want some of your properties." I'm just because we know you are affiliated or live by you. We don't have that right.
Right, exactly. I know
Okay,
you understand it fully, Tave. You've made great comments in previous
I
videos.
try to make it
And
simpler.
what's interesting about that is Tave not only researches on behalf of the position that we're putting forth, which is true and accurate and lawful, and supports it, but he's looking into his own connections with the posterity, the founding fathers, with the laws and the treaties, which he was blessed and fortunate to discover that all treaties are binding.
Mhm. And I'm not lucky enough to have someone that's tied into the posterity through the founding fathers, but I am someone that is directly tied in through the Cherokee Nation.
Go ahead, Al.
Could I say
Little
something?
Yeah, I'm
documentation.
sorry. Go ahead, Grant. Yeah, let Grant respond to.
Okay.
Okay, one thing that you need to understand about those treaties that were made. See, it's who
Mhm.
made the treaties. Okay, so when we were a republic, I would say the treaties that were made with the Cherokee and most of the other native nations was
Mhm.
made with the republic, right? So once they did the switch in 33 and completed it in 1947, so they went fully into a territorial government and they're no longer operating the republic. Okay. So so the question becomes, can the United States that's existing today have any binding legal agreement based upon those treaties to those native peoples?
Now I'm going to go back a little bit before that. Then I would think that when they first made the choice, because they were there in that area, these 13 colonies were occupied, so that whatever deals. I mean, I know there's sketchy and scarce paperwork, but there's some through the Virginia company I'm trying to get to. Those documents show at the very beginning that they did it, whether what it was traded for or how they worked it out. But it was then that the ones that I'm talking about, you like in the 1930s, I think I'm too far. I don't think I'll have any say in that whatsoever because of the government being able to step in and say, well, no, 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 no. I'm trying to go back to where 13 colonies have it set up. And the people that were there when they got there are the ones that say, okay, now we have to make a deal because they weren't that mean or let's call it, they weren't that savage to say they can't have anything. They've helped us in some ways they didn't. But they did help out some people, some of the tribes, and make deals with them. I've got that, but I just can't find the specifics on where it's at. So, but I think the longer it goes towards like your 1930s, I think I'm getting more kicked in the ding ding.
Go ahead, Grant.
Well, I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying. So, see, we had a republic, and that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
We had a republic, and that republic is not being operated today.
Oh,
Once
okay.
they
I see
did
what
this,
you're saying. Yeah.
once they did the switch, and they completed the switch with the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court made the switch in time cases completed by 1937. They completed this new territorial government was put into full operation in 1945, I think, by Harry S. Truman. Okay, so the government that of the republic that made the treaties with those Native American nations, it's not in operation today. So
Occupied now, right?
a legal question would be, how could that nation, that federal territorial government, have any binding legal relations to those peoples under those treaties anymore? Because that nation that's existent today, that government, is not the one that made the treaties.
And that kind of reins us back into the whole purpose again, which I'm glad to see Adam here because this would preface my hello to him right now is, again, we're not claiming to be sovereigns over anybody or their rulers or their dictators or their kings. We're simply pointing out that there are a people, many of whom can identify themselves as we can, who by law and by treaty have sovereignty. They are sovereigns by law, and they are the ones that founded the nation. They are the only ones that can lawfully change the government that they established for the betterment of all Americans. So all we're trying to do is let the posterity know who they are and what they have that they've forgotten and that has been robbed from them fraudulently, had the wool pulled over their eyes. Wake up, know who you are, know that you have all rights and immunities by treaty, by law. That is your standing. That is your lawful standing on this earth, in this world, in this nation, which you still have the superior right to claim above and beyond anything that this artificial, fraudulent government, as we would call it, does, even though they're.
I want to add to what my dad's saying because those treaties are.
Hold on.
Those treaties are binding, and I want to just let everybody know here that the word binding has very strong implications in law. And I'll share a quick story with you guys that I found out for the last 2 weeks. A friend of mine that I know has been fighting the county. You know, he owns a piece of land, and half a mile away, the county owns a piece of land. Now that piece of land that the county owns was conveyed to the county 20 years ago by his father. And when his father conveyed that land to the county, he created a trust indenture. And on that trust indenture, it stipulated that the county was to only remain the owners of this property if they were to sub it out for fire suppression purposes only. And if they were to violate that, the property would revert back to the family. So with that being said, they were going to put a 5G tower there. They had plans. The county commissioners were going to put a 5G tower there a couple weeks ago. They had a meeting about that. So I told him to send me a copy of the deed, and I read it through, and I explained to him, I said, look, there's a trust indenture that's binding, okay? So I said, that's a contractual agreement. I said, when you go to court, I said, you have to look at a courtroom as being a place where a judge is going to look at a contract. I said, so you can bring a cause of action against the county commissioners if they're breaching this contract. And by building a cell tower here, that's going to, negatively affect you with its 5G. They're going against the stipulations of the trust indenture that your dad formed. Now you have a cause of action. So today, he went to a meeting because they were going to have a meeting today in Collier County, whether they were going to approve this plan or not. And he told me he brought those things up to the county commissioners about how they could not violate the stipulations of that deed because they were binding. And at the end of that meeting, they decided that they were going to terminate that project when he threatened them with a cause of action for a breach of contract. So the importance that I wanted, the reason I'm sharing this story with everybody is because I want everybody to know that the implication of the word binding has very, very strong legal effects. And everything my dad's talking about concerning treaty is binding. So that's why these people that we were talking about, the posterity, they do have the legal standing and authority to be able to go into court because treaties are binding.
Right, they have the standing. That's the only point we're bringing up. The posterity do have the lawful standing, and that's why they need to unite and organize. Let me let Elva go ahead.
Can I ask-
See, you're
you're
punching out there,
how-
brother, but
Exist
hold
to have
on,
this?
Dave. I want to go ahead and move on to Elva. He's been waiting for quite a while, and Adam's still waiting. So I'll just lower your hand for now. You can come raise your hand
All right,
again if
well,
you
maybe
want. And
no,
get it to you.
shoot me that number. I'm just trying to figure out an overall number that somebody might be available for the posterity, even an I.
Gotcha. Yeah. Go ahead, Elva. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know how it reads to you, but it is El Ya with
Oh,
a
yeah.
Y.
Yes. Yeah. I said
Yes,
first I
and
said Elva, and then I saw it was a Y. So yeah, got it.
sir. Good conversation, good stuff being spoken, and the truth is coming out. And so, with where you were talking about, like the part of the governments that's here, both parts of the government exist. We just didn't know to use the republic before. We thought we had to use the United States corporation, but now we're learning that we can use the republic side of everything. And so people just have to do diligent work and study things like the UCC codes and stuff. See, we're sitting here in a group, and then like somebody should be walking away with an assignment to study the UCC, and then somebody else should be the SEC, and somebody else the IRS. You're there to study it and bring back reports to how to free the people from all of this stuff, because everybody right now with the implications, if you don't speak against it and say you're not a part of it, you're in it. And so the documents that we all filled out, you have to rescind those documents and get out of their system. And this is the point that we're at. So I understand groundwork, but if the people like who are coming to the table now are not ready to take on an assignment to help everyone within it, then that's where I hear Joe saying, we've been doing this and spinning our wheels. But I know you're spinning your wheels because at the end of the day, it's not really a group effort, except based on the way of one person pointing it out. Everybody needs a hands on deck, take an assignment, take part of this system, learn it, and then show us how to reapply it to our world.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that, Elia. And obviously we're taking it up a notch even more so in that the matter of standing is a very significant one. I don't know if you've heard us discuss the fact that, when there was, 14th Amendment citizens, I presume really, that were trying to take a case against Obama with the birth certificate issue, and the Supreme Court dismissed it based upon a lack of standing that person had. My son has brought cases into courts showing that he's a living man on the land in the Republic. And only after doing so did the judge say, oh, I have no jurisdiction in this case. There's clearly relativity to the lawful standing a person has. And as our friend from Britain, I encourage everybody that's here now that missed the first 30 minutes to watch this when I get it uploaded. The first 30 minutes, we had a very articulate friend from Britain articulate very precisely and exactly what's really going on here. So be sure to try to listen to the beginning of this when you get a chance. Adam, go ahead, brother. Yeah, Adam's been waiting for a while, so he might have walked off. to do something.
No, I
there?
haven't. Sorry, I started
Oh, here
talking.
he is.
I assumed you had unmuted me. So there's been some misconception about why I left the last discussion. It has nothing to do with running away and everything to do with there's a certain point in the conversation when you're just wasting energy. And I felt like I had reached that in the last discussion. So I'm going to clear that right now. But I want you guys to understand something about all this gobbledygook. You guys are talking about the law and what things mean. The basis and premises of everything you're talking about in the prosperity is based on the fact that the founders declared war against the crown and won that war. So they won it through conquering these colonies and taking it away from the redcoats, who at that point had enjoyed a lawful claim over these lands that it had expended its energy and time helping to build. So all of what you are saying, all about the law and all about your interpretations and the posterity, that all falls apart as soon as somebody decides they've had enough of it and they decide to conquer you and reestablish a new posterity. That doesn't even make sense. So this entire chain of events immediately is moot point as long as somebody comes in and conquers. And if that's the case, the invading army that is currently here on this land, the 200 and something thousand to multi-millions that have been coming across these borders, all they need to do is slaughter you, take it from you, and they are now the lawful owners, quote unquote, by your own logic. And that doesn't make any sense. The other part of this that doesn't make sense, we the people cannot only mean those, they, them, the founders and their children. And I will tell you why, because in the Declaration of Independence, it says that all people are endowed by their they are endowed by their creator. They're not endowed by a crown. They're not endowed by their actions. They are endowed by their creator to overthrow the crown, right? Because they have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So it's not by any action. It's not by any attributes that they have other than they were created. And it's nature, it's the laws of natures and nature's God that entitled them. So it doesn't fit
well, you made 2 points.
that we are creating that. Now, hang on, Mike. So the idea that the crown owned some kind of nobility and right to rule over these colonies, was the very thing that they overthrew. There is no inherent right to rule, and there is no divine right to rule either, because all men are created equal. Because we know that the crown ruled by successional generations of familial relationships. That was what they were overthrowing. That's what they overthrew in the beginning. And all of the writings that I sent you that I spent 2 days working on, all of that stuff points to the fact that they were rejecting that idea, that the crown had the inherent right to rule, that they inherited it, that you are creating another class of rulers. You're creating the ruling class. I don't have a problem with the idea that the native people, which if we're going to go back to the inherited native people, then we need to turn this over to the Native Americans, and presuming that they were the first people on the land, or we need to turn it over to the Jews, who were the first people given any land by the Creator himself. These ideas don't hold water. Everything you're saying, as soon as someone conquers this land, it is now theirs. And I will yield from there.
Yeah. Again,
Well, he's partially right, other than the fact he was wrong when he said they didn't create a ruling class, because they did create a crown republic, as I mentioned earlier. And the ruling class were the posterity, because they made a body of sovereigns instead of just living under one. They created
What
a
evidence
body.
they made a body of sovereigns?
Yeah,
That
I was
would
going
be
to say,
so.
too,
Here's the
Mike.
thing. Here's
Hold on,
here's
Adam.
the
Yeah,
argument I have with people
we're
who argue.
responding. We're responding, Adam. We're responding to what you were saying. Because
Because
I was also going to say, if what you said was true, they wouldn't have went over there and had a Treaty of Paris signed, giving them sovereignty.
Giving who sovereignty?
The
So
framers and
here's
the
the thing.
founders.
You would not have to infer you would not have to rely on this being the one word, the posterity, and trying to define what posterity is. If it had meant to be only a specific individual line of people by familial relationship,
All right,
that
you
would have
mentioned the word
been defined.
gobbledygook. You're doing gobbledygook again, and we're trying to respond to you. Just used a lot of gobbledygook there, saying we're defining. We're not defining the word
we're reading it
posterity. So I mean, that's gobbledygook for you to be talking like you are very quickly with a lot of information and then making a statement like that. That's gobbledygook. So and this is why I asked you.
I'm not going to sit here and argue, but
Right.
for the comment that if you want to try and come and conquer me, bring it on. That's the only comment I'm going to make. Bring it on. Bring it on.
And then I was going to
That was
say,
ignorant
I
as hell.
told you.
I'm just going to say that.
Well,
That
he's
was-
responding to what he believed to be ignorant on your part, to be saying that you're going to fight against us because we're standing for our rights that have been granted to us by way of treaty and law. Well,
that is not what I
us,
said, Mike. That is not what I said.
That's it. That's
I'm
what you
telling
said.
you
I got
that
it.
you are
It's
declaring
recorded. You said
that is not
said
what
you-
I said. Let me
did.
reestablish what I said. You
I'll
are
fight
saying that the
against you.
posterity, you are saying the posterity is only those who were present who fought against the crown. The crown had a lawful claim because they were the creators and the funders and the supporters of the colonies up to that point. The crown made lawful claim on the colonies up to that point, right?
Go ahead,
And then
Grant.
the colonies revolted.
We're not making any claims. We're reading what we've discovered.
Right. We're not making any
You're
claims.
making a claim to be of a posterity that they
we
define.
are. We know we are.
I didn't make that claim.
I didn't
either.
make that claim.
I didn't make that.
It's not what you say or what
we're
you
just
know.
saying what we discovered. We didn't claim
Right.
to be posterity. I
Right.
didn't even make that claim. We're just claiming the discoveries that we've made.
Right.
That's all we're-
Discoveries.
Okay.
I didn't a year ago. I didn't even
Okay.
know it. Now I'm glad
Fine.
I do.
Fine.
Grant wanted to make a comment. Go ahead, Grant.
Well, what's the case happenstance? The Supreme Court made a clear ruling, that those people who were here
I'll get
at
you
the beginning establishment of the nation, that there's no doubt of their citizenship. And Chisholm versus Georgia clearly stated that the people are sovereign.
Yeah, and that was a point I addressed this earlier, Adam, before you came on. You weren't on yet, so you can go back and listen to it. But you made a comment last week on our discussion. And as I was listening to it, I made the comment earlier on this conversation that when I heard it, it was like laughable. You were like, "Well, I'm not a sovereign. Nobody's a sovereign. We're not sovereigns." Yet that's the first thing you hear out of the mouths of people like yourself that claim to be patriots who are opposed to this corrupt federal government. You're a sovereign. They don't have no control over you. The simple fact of the matter is there is such a thing as a sovereign. There is such a thing in law as a sovereign, and we are governed by governments created by men in this world that we live in.
So I never claimed that there was no such thing as sovereign.
You
Every
did. Go back and
individual
listen to
is
last
sovereign.
week's videos.
Every individual is sovereign, endowed by their creator.
Right. And by the way, on that note you just made, we addressed that also earlier before you came on. That was actually my key topic tonight, was to put to rest what I call myths and misinterpretations and indoctrinated concepts, where they'll use what was written 12 years before the preamble, when they said we're going to now create a more perfect union that we're going to secure for ourselves and our posterity, when they had made that headway. 12 years earlier, when they stated that we believe all men are created equal, that's being purposefully misused. It's wording that they're trying to put into even people's current understanding of the preamble. They added in there as if it's part of it when it's not, because they're trying to get this concept in people's minds of, they meant all men. They created this nation for all men in the world to come over here and be free. That's not what they did. Even by way of common sense, they had a will for their blood, just like you would today for your blood, and I do for my blood.
If Adam is referencing a quote from the Declaration of Independence, and he knows who wrote it, so then maybe he can explain to us why he owned slaves if all men were created equal. Why did the man who quoted that own slaves?
But then that brings up the topic of, what does that even mean, a slave? What, a worker would be a better word. They got free room and board. They were working.
They weren't considered as human or beings. They were considered property. That's why.
That's right. And thank you for that point, Joe, because in law, they had no lawful standing. So again, we're back to law. We're back to the reality of law. And that's what we're going by. By law, we are.
But they recognized they were wrong too, Mike. But they also recognized they were wrong.
And on that note, and MJ can elaborate on the point of slavery. It was those colonialists, and I believe she said 1778, that said, we're done with slavery. No more. We're done.
Not only that, but our direct gave 200 acres of land to the black servants, indentured servants.
MJ wants to speak.
If I may. You can elaborate. Yeah. So all you have to do is look at the Articles of Association, our first republic, Congress, after the 4,622 militiamen took down the court in Westchester County. We did our first Continental Congress. It started with a prayer to the triune God, ending in with the Lord Jesus Christ at the end. And the second point, at the end of the first paragraph of the Articles of Association, it says it was by the free Protestant colonies. We were Protestants. And then the second point in that association, Articles of Association, says that by December 1st of the next year, which would have been 1775, we will have nothing to do with slavery, because us in the Republic, us posterity, are different. We don't do that kind of stuff. And so no one listened. We got rid of slavery in 1775.
You say us posterity. So then what if I say us liberty? Yeah, I mean, you're taking that one word again and using it in the context that it's like the whole meaning of everything that they, intended and wrote in the preamble. That's not how it was intended, though. That was my argument earlier.
The people that carried on slavery from that point forward are the same people that have us all enslaved now. And Tave can elaborate on who they are, but I'm not going to go any further on that point. They're the same ones that perpetuated it back then. Because they were merchants, they were seafarers, they were also in the slave trade, they were merchants, and they're the same people that have enslaved us all today.
And Joe, just to reiterate on the point you just made, you again are asserting your opinion of what the forefathers intended. What they intended was their very words, which, like Adam says, is dependent on one word. That one word alone says it all, and there's many words that you can say that are very powerful and meaningful.
Well, Mike, in Christian versus Georgia, we could talk about Supreme Court cases. What did they rule that? You said you got that case, Josh. That you studied that case. How does that coincide with Happenstack? So the case happens.
Go ahead, Grant. Josh went into the bath. My son just left the room.
All right.
Grant, you want to answer that?
Well, essentially, the original citizenship was created by Article 1 of the Treaty of Paris. And that citizenship is reflected in the Constitution, where they refer to citizen with a capital C. And those citizens are identified, talked about in Article 3, where we created the judiciary and other places in the Constitution. And Happenstack merely stated that there was a question of citizenship in that case, but they said if you have a lineage, if you're a posterity lineage to those people who were here at the foundation of the country, there is no doubt of your citizenship.
And let me just piggyback on what you said there, Grant. This really going to you, Adam. If if essentially what you're saying, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but I'm saying essentially a connotation of what could be construed of your suggestions is we don't need government. Hey, get rid of government. Let's have, just a free for all, anarchy. People are free to do whatever they want. No, we live by laws of men and create governments. And in the confines of those governments, there are laws and there are treaties. And that's what we're standing on. Not one word. We're standing on the principle of that one word.
And all of that breaks down.
Hey.
So what were let's look at it this way, because you keep saying I'm gobbledygooking, so I'm just gonna drop it because you're not hearing me. So let's start here. What were the colonists to the crown prior to the revolution? The posterity you speak of right now, what were the founders to the crown?
They were subjects to the crown.
Right. By what? By the law. By the law set forth by the crown itself.
That's right. And then this brings up, go ahead, because this brings up another point that I want to bring this back to in terms of rulership. Because if we take what you're trying to suggest here to the fullest extent, then that would mean let's get rid of Jesus Christ. Let's get rid of God. There's no ruler. We're back to
I'm asserting your logic here.
Right.
So
the
founders decided that it was not the crown that ruled them.
No, I wouldn't.
Divine right?
I would put it in different words. I would say that men of God stood up against the tyranny, oppression that was put upon them, so that they could create a godly nation, a godly.
And I agree with that. You and I 100. I'm trying to find a common ground. You and I agree on that 100%. I know about the Black Robe Regiment and the Protestant revolutions and stuff. I know all about that. Okay. So they actually called it the Presbyterian Revolt in England at the time. So, yes, I'm aware of that. Now, they decided that it was God's will that they revolt against the crown because no man has an inherent right to rule. All men are created equal. These were in the writings of John Locke and Thomas Paine at the time. That's what set forth in motion a lot of the ideas that led to the revolution.
Can you give me the quote give me the quote for, well, because again, I would like to know if that's an actual quote, no man has the right to rule, or what context that was in terms of, again, the belief that Christ is king, the ultimate ruler, and in terms of individual sovereignty. Individual sovereignty means ruling yourself.
Correct. So look at the writings of John Locke and Thomas Paine, but those were reflected in the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal by nature, and nature's God.
That's correct. And therefore what they were saying is, hey, this is our position, that all men are created equal and under nature's God. And therefore we're going to stand and fight for it for ourselves. And we're going to secure it for ourselves and our posterity.
Against the tyranny that was imposed upon them by someone who said that they had the divine right to rule. Correct. So we are okay up to this point. It would be insane to me, and I'm just telling you from my point of view, that these same people would create a new line of inheritance, the same as the one they just overthrew. They are not owners. They are establishing a free people who are capable of owning, that all people are created equal by their creator and by nature's God. I am not advocating that people come here and invade this country and take anything from anybody. I see the mess that is going on in this country by the immigration. So that's not what I am suggesting.
Don't ramble on that. You made a point, so let's address it. Don't you think that anybody who creates a nation, you just said you don't agree with people just flooding in here?
Yes.
Right? So that means there's got to be some control. So don't you think the people that founded the nation would certainly be wanting to secure that? as they said, for
As they
themselves and
should
their blood.
have.
Because at that time, because you got to think in their minds at their time, under common law, which clearly heirs, inheritance, that's biblical, man. That goes to God's elect. And those
Correct.
people were godly. They were Christian, Bible believing men. So they were establishing, they went to fight and give their lives if need be, and many of them did, to secure a free nation, because they believe all men are created free. So we're going to do it. We're going to do it for ourselves and our posterity. We're going to make
Correct.
sure we secure it for ourselves and our
Correct.
posterity,
And for
because they don't want, they're not doing it so that just anybody in the world can come over here and trample on them.
correct. And for many, many years, right? For the generous majority of the existence of this new nation they created, they made sure not to import into their midst their enemy. But we've decided to
Not
drop
only that, but they
code.
had the Naturalization Act, which specified who could graft into this new nation as
Correct.
posterity.
Right. It wasn't decided to be dropped. We had somebody, an infiltrator in 1965, go against what we wanted because they've invaded the whole thing. This whole thing is bogus. It all needs to go. And we got to go back to before all this time, because they did totally against what we want to do. We, the people, were not asked about that at all.
Right.
I agree. I agree with that. So
Can I say
Yeah,
something?
this is what I'm
Grant
trying
wants
to
to
get
say
at.
something. Hold on. Let Grant comment. Go ahead, Grant.
Well, when that act was made in 1964, they had, through deception, essentially converted all of we the people from the status of state citizens to U.S. citizens. So that was not even an act of the people. It was an act of U.S. citizens by their representatives in this new federal territorial government. See, the whole thing switched over. You know, you got to make the distinction, you know, between the reality that exists now and the one that existed in the republic that our forefathers created. That republic has been removed from you through deception and lies and murder. It's been taken away from you. And now you're over here in what Franklin Delano Roosevelt referred to in 1935 in his speech to Congress as the appearance of reality. You're no longer in reality. And that's the problem. And what we're simply trying to say is, like the guy that talked before about, you know, its jurisdiction. That federal territorial government and all the laws that it enacts only applies in the federal territorial plane. So they had to give you remedy. And one of the remedies is in Title 28, 1746-1, as opposed to 1746-2. Now, if you want to operate in the Republic, 1746-1 is your remedy. So, but the other thing is the status. So in today's world, the founders fixed it so that that people that immigrated into the country could be naturalized as state citizens, having this same status as those posterity. But in today's world, the only citizenship that's being given is a U.S. citizenship. And that citizenship is the property of that territorial government up there in Washington, D.C. They own you. So in today's world, what we're simply saying, that to me, the only people that can make a claim to that original citizenship is those who can show that they have the birthright. And that birthright comes from the laws of nature and nature's God. That's what makes you a legitimate heir. And those people, at least I have something that I can make a claim to that original status. I have the birthright to claim that original status. And that federal territorial government up there has no jurisdiction over this original citizenship. They separated That they separated themselves and started in 33 and ended it in 47, 45 or 47, and they separated themselves into a de facto government separate from the de jure government created by the people. It has nothing to do with us. And that's where you're at today. That's what you're up against. Everything else that's been argued about is it's meaningless in some ways, because we're at the tip right here, and this is the only way that I know that you can legally do anything.
Right, to have the lawful
I
standing to do
think I
something. My
finally
son-
understand.
Like, hold on, Adam. My
And
son wants to
support
make a
what
comment.
Grant wants to say, you know, people want to talk about opinions or read opinions, like Adam liked to quote Thomas Paine or Thomas Jefferson, and that's great. Everybody has an opinion, but to me, the only relevant opinions are the ones that pertain precisely and exactly to the law. So, for example, what I do is I read the Federalist Papers, because it's been held that when the Supreme Court or any federal district court of the United States attempts to interpret the Constitution, they look to the Federalist Papers, because the Federalist Papers, which, you know, created the Constitution, signifies the founder's intent. So with that being said, let me make it known that Alexander Hamilton in Federalist Paper number 1 made posterity very clear when he stated, quote, "Let us reflect that it is not only the present generation, but our posterity also who are to be the recipients of the blessings to be derived from this undertaking, and that the chosen path of moderation and wisdom will lead us to a fair prospect of success." Now, that was quoted by Alexander Hamilton, Federalist Paper 1.
And again, for
So these
those
men have made it very clear.
and for those
what
who
their
would
intent-
want to put a twist on him using the word posterity as if that means something, particularly when you go back then, coming out of common law, very clear what posterity was: heirs, bloodline.
Well, you're kind of, so to me, I was going to put forward just now before you started that Grant made a point just now, apart from all this, everything you just said, that actually resonated in my understanding. And that would have been the legal lawful claim being able to trace back as a member of the posterity that helped to form the nation and right, would be able to make a claim against the corporation government that has been installed since. That makes sense to me, because I am all about all things.
Ironically,
I get that,
you know how they're always,
but this is a different argument than being an inheritor. It is having the legal standing in the ornate law to oppose the government that they are trying to impose on us presently. That
I
I
agree.
understand.
Yeah.
Okay. That that is one thing I do agree with. It would be kind
and
of
that's
like
a major
finding
part.
that
That's
would
a
be
major
like
part of our
finding your
motivation.
the allodial title to your land. It would be similar to that. So
Yeah, and
I
Grant,
agree.
elaborate on that, because that I appreciate that, because that's a major part of our motivation here, is the fact that we, how does it say it? The to I always forget the darn word, to abolish, right? We have an obligation to abolish that government, but that's the government that we created. We meaning the founding fathers. So therefore, the posterity today can say we, because it's blood. My grandfather's 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 grandfather created that. He made this. He established it to be this way. So one of the funny things is, in the media, in the movies, a lot you'll see they put, you know how we say they put things in plain sight in movies, and I've heard in so many movies where they'll have a little line where they say it's not what you know, but what you can prove, and that's a big part of what Grant and my son are working on together, is putting together the optimal paperwork with the optimal narrative, the optimal law references, legal references, Supreme Court sightings, treaties, everything that powerhouses the fact that here's a people that can prove who they are, and they created you. They have authority over you, you corrupt government, and they can do something about it. Go ahead, Elyon.
Well, I just wanted clarity on. It sounded like the young man said that the Constitution was written from the Federalist Papers. And that would be incorrect if that's what I heard. The Constitution came first, and then the Federalist Papers came afterwards to support the Constitution and help build the federal government. That's what, because we had a federal party, and all of a sudden the federal party disappears. The federal party became the federal government.
Right. Well, I took it in context with that very thing that he was saying the Federalist Papers are
right.
consistent.
I made an error when I said that that's what they used before they ratified the Constitution. It was to support the
Oh,
federal
you said, I didn't hear you
government.
say that.
No, he's absolutely correct with what he just stated. It was to support the
So-
federal government. The Federalist Papers did come after the Constitution, but
To
still,
support the federal
it was
government.
to prove a point, you know, about the topic.
Well, yeah, he's familiar with the Federalist Papers because he's read them. He understands their significance in terms of the.
But Elia is correct. The Federalist Papers came after the Constitution.
Right.
The federal government.
But the courts can look at those to infer the intent of the lawmaker. I think that's what you're saying. I think that was Cohen versus Independence. I think that was where the Supreme Court said, you know, they can look back at those documents to where there's a question or ambiguity to the law. They can look back to those papers to infer the intent of the lawmakers. In other words, to bring clarity to some question, constitutional question.
Adam, your hand's still raised. Do you want to say anything else?
I would say that in the sense that you are making a claim against the present nature of the United States corporation, if you were going back to the organic law by which the nation was originally founded and that was your intention, then that would be a definite, indisputable ground to stand on that we were harmed when it was taken by the corporation from those who originally fought. That makes sense to me if that's the ground we're standing on. Now, that would be a lawful stance. Apart from that, I don't see creating a ruling class based on posterity, because people earn their right to own property and land by the nature of the creator. And at one time we had a path to becoming a productive member of this nation or society or community or whatever we want to call it, the individual states of the republic. There was a path to that. That path has been since perverted and distorted into just let everybody and anybody in, including your enemies, which is not what the founders obviously intended. I mean, they created the Navy to battle the Barbary pirates shortly after its creation and stuff like that. We were at war with our enemies almost immediately. The War of 1812, so.
Well, that was just the enemy again trying to take down the republic. They
correct,
right off
correct.
the get-go.
So letting anyone and everyone in, I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't believe that that's a thing. I don't like it. We have the right as the current possessors of the land and as the ruling body of we the people to close our front door and not allow just anyone and everyone in to occupy whatever. That I also agree with. Okay, so
there's many Americans in this nation who forget proving their posterity. They'll even acknowledge they're not, and they would agree with that. There's absolutely Americans that would. I mean, I've been on shows where we've had people say, "Hey, if it takes getting the posterity to get this nation right, that makes sense to me. And if they are the ones that have the lawful standing to be able to go and do something, then let's make that happen." That's been our premise from the beginning.
Yeah, from the standpoint of the law and reestablishing the actual republic, that I agree with. So I will give you that much.
Hallelujah. I knew you were going to come around, Adam.
Well,
it
just needed to be an understanding of where we were going with this, because I felt like you were creating a new line of nobility or
No,
the
and
line of
I know, and I appreciate that. And that's why it's important to have these talks, because people are going to get ideas and not fully understand where we're coming from or what we're doing, but it's important that they do. And having these discussions and recording them, I'm making them available for others to listen to, is going to help that. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, to claim this status back, that I want to be your superior, your principal, your sovereign. I don't want to be. I don't want to be. I don't want to take care of you, So, but with that said, there's only two classes of citizens in this country. There's the state citizens created by Article 1 of the Treaty of Paris, and there's U.S. citizens created by the 14th Amendment. Okay. And like I've said before, the Supreme Court has ruled that U.S. citizens are the property and are franchises of the United States. Okay, so that means you're the property of that government up there in the 10-mile square. And Article 4, Section 3 says that nothing, I'll say it again, nothing in this Constitution shall be used to prejudice any of the claims of the United States, nor of any state.
Which means the people, because the courts have ruled there's no distinction between the states. And
well, let me go back to that. So to understand what's going on, when they separated themselves from the de jure government of the people and created a federal territorial government, they recreated the several states of the United States. And that's in Title 21, 81 through 131, I think. They recreated all 50 states. Now,
you meant Title 28. I'm sorry, you said 21,
yeah,
28.
Title 28, 81 through 131. And those states have never joined the Union pursuant to Article 4, Section 4. They're purely territorial. And when you're dealing with the states today, that's the government that you're dealing with. Okay. So the original states, the one where Penwall versus Stone said there is no distinction between the people and their states that did join the Union, is the states at 28 USC 1746-1. The other states are at 28 USC 1746-2. You're on one side of the fence or you're on the other. Now, you can be a U.S. citizen, and if you control the condition precedent to any contract, stipulation, or agreements by using your remedy at 28 U.S.C. 1746-1, then you're under the laws of the United States Republic. If you don't say anything in today's world, it's automatically assumed you're at 28 U.S.C. 1746-2. You're under the laws of the United States federal territorial government. So the Republic's still there, but nobody's home. You abandoned it.
Well, right now you're talking about things that I have largely known already for a very long time, but I'm getting where you're going with it at this point, so I understand. I think I understand that.
Go ahead, MJ.
Thank you, Grant, for your explanation. I appreciate it.
So I just want to make clear, I don't want to be anybody's sovereign. I don't want a slave. I don't want a subject. I don't want, that's not what we're saying. We're just saying we want to come back to our original status as we the people, as our forefathers created this nation to be, and be in the republic that they created for us.
Well, I will say this about it. It is real easy to take the way you guys are presenting this as creating a new noble class. It is real easy to do that, and it'll be real easy to pervert it that way. So I think I'm getting where you're going with it, and it probably needs it needs kind of a redress on how you're presenting. And I'm not sure right now because my mind is kind of spinning on this right now, trying to figure out how to even present that without giving that.
Adam.
Yes.
When you hear the first 30 minutes of this, our friend from Britain, who really articulated it well, I think you'll appreciate it all the more. I'll have this uploaded by tomorrow. You can listen to it.